you want. Very good. So I'll go ahead and just recap a little bit what we did at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre yesterday. And so we talked about several lines of evidence. One line of evidence has to do with geographies, like where is this in relation to where is the church in relation to the wall at that particular time. And so this is just outside the wall. It's the third wall, and the third wall wasn't constructed. It got started in 41. Herod Agrippa I was told to stop building, and then it got started again in the middle 60s with the Zealots who were trying to protect Jerusalem. They finished the wall off just before the Romans got here and destroyed it. The third wall. So this wall that you see just down the way is not there in Jesus' day. It is simply not there. Period. Okay, so you've got archaeology, that's another stream of evidence. Matters having to do with pictures and stuff. If you saw how much it's changed since 1901, that picture was taken in 01, we're now in 2022. So in 25, 22, 21 years, the face of that escarpment, which is exposed to the elements, right, is changing one way or another over time. Then take and extrapolate the amount of change that's happened in these 21 years and go back from whenever this was first identified in 1842 and again in 1878 and then finally by Charles Gordon's Calvary in 1883. Extrapolate that backward to the first century AD. How much change because of weather conditions and erosion and stuff has happened. And so photographs, as cool as they are, you know, it's not the determining factor. We have no ancient tradition that connects this. And we have a geographical problem, we have a textual problem. The reality of it, though, is that the event is more important than the location. Would we agree on that? And so it's simply a matter of us refining our ability to discern true from false. And it's more of a, I'm not going to say it's exclusively an academic exercise, but it helps us to hone our own abilities to look at evidence like you would if you were a juror in a jury trial, and you would be weighing evidence. What do the forensics say? What do the witnesses say? You know, what does the person accused say? What does the person who was assaulted or whatever say? Right? You get all that confluence of data, and then you have to make decisions. So the bottom line is that the event, the reality of the event, is more important than the location of the event. All right, so Pastor asked me to say just a couple of things to sort of set the stage for our own observance of Holy Communion or the Lord's Supper or communion, whatever you call it. And so I thought that I would just do a couple of reflections on ancient history, ancient reality. Death of Jesus. Death, burial, and resurrection on the third day of Jesus is corroborated by Josephus in Antiquities of the Jews, Book 18. I have a whole presentation on what can we know about Jesus from evidence outside the Bible, which is fascinating because if in our world, back in the West, you have people who are postmodern or who are, scientific naturalists or whoever that you are denying the authority of the Bible, how do you present to people who don't accept the authority of Scripture the most important event in the history of mankind, death, burial, resurrection? And so I was being asked this by people who were Chi Alpha pastors and youth pastors and senior pastors and by concerned parents and stuff. We sent our kid off to secular university. They came back and they've been fed all of this stuff about, well, Jesus is just a myth. He's just a composite figure like Robin Hood or King Arthur or whatever. And so as far as we know, Jesus never even really existed historically. So I started collecting sources. It eventually morphed into a PowerPoint presentation. I have archaeology, I have ancient Jewish sources, I have ancient Roman sources, I have ancient Greek sources. And it is absolutely fascinating. Did it at Central Assembly not too terribly long ago. You guys remember when we were doing that, what was it, Case for Truth? Okay. So that's there, and it's on Central Assembly's website. If you're interested, Pastor Jim's got got tons of good stuff on there, then you can kind of, you know, fake your way through that presentation just by looking at it online. So there's that. We have Josephus, he says, he was crucified by Pontius Pilate, he was buried, and then his disciples are preaching, you know, he's saying in his day, his first century disciples are preaching that he was raised from the dead on the third day. That he even gets that detail into Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews, book 18. So there's one little piece of ancient history. Another is, if I could hearken your recollection back to the day that we did the Dead Sea, Masada, Qumran, and all of that. It was a great day, you remember it? Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that I said there when we were at Qumran, and I was just kind of drawing some connections between Qumran and the ministry of John the Baptist and Jesus and later Christianity. Okay, and one of the things there that I said was that this is a community that differs from the rabbinic community, the Pharisaic movement. They're a different, if you want to call it, denomination, Essenes or whatever. And so they have a practice when they are involved in their sacred meals. There's a blessing that is uttered before they drink or before they eat, and the priest of the community says this blessing first over the bread and then over the wine. We've got that, you know, in the literature of the period. So that then tells us that when the early Christian community comes along, when Jesus is doing his Last Supper that becomes the template for our celebration or our observance of the Lord's Supper or Holy Communion or whatever you call that, that there is a precedent for it already in pre-Christian Judaism. Jesus is not making this up whole cloth. So bread and wine, even though it's different from the Pharisees, wine and bread, like at the Passover celebration, it nevertheless has pre-Christian, pre-Jesus antecedents. It's there in the tradition. It's there resident within pre-Christian Jewish culture, religious practice, and that sort of thing. Now the question is, where do the Essenes get it? Where did they get bread first and then wine? Because it's a reversal. One thing we might say is, well, it's just because they were trying to find ways to be different. Denominations do that a lot. We need to draw very clear, you know, observable lines, and so sometimes we're going to make a big deal out of something that really isn't a big deal. But I think that there's even more helpful biblical warrant to what the Essenes are doing than just we just need to be different. We need to come up with ways that differentiate us from the rabbinic / Pharisaic movement up in the hill country. And they have biblical warrant for it. Genesis chapter 14, we have a guy showing up in the life of Father Abraham, and after he delivers Lot up at Dan and is bringing him back home, going toward the Negev south, Beersheba. Mm-hmm. It says that Melchizedek, king of Shalem, and the word for it in Hebrew, Jerusalem is Yerushalayim. Shalem, Yerushalayim. You hear the sound? That's Yeru just means ear of, city of. So city of Shalem or Shalayim. That's very close. He comes out to Father Abraham and brings him bread and wine and then blesses him. It's almost like a sacramental meal. And so for these Dead Sea-ites, these Qumranites or Essenes, they really view Melchizedek is an important figure. He's not like in the Old Testament where he just pops in one time and buddy, he's gone.